If you've ever struggled to stick to an exercise routine, you've probably blamed yourself for not having enough discipline. But more often than not, that's not the real problem. The real issue is aiming for a level of fitness that doesn't fit your life. Let me explain what I mean. If you imagine your fitness on a spectrum, and at one end you've got a version of you that doesn't really think about it at all. You're not moving very much, you eat whatever you like, whatever's easiest, and sleep isn't a priority. You know it's not ideal, but it's easy. And at the other end, you've got the complete opposite. You're training most days of the week, you're tracking your food and planning everything. You say no to nights out because it doesn't fit your plan. Now maybe you're thinking, that's what I should be doing. But here's the problem. Neither of those extremes really fit most people's lives. And this is where people get stuck. Because when you decide you want to get fitter, you don't aim for the middle, you aim for the extreme. We're encouraged to chase excellence. So you go from very little to trying to train 5-6 days a week, cleaning up your diet overnight and trying to be on it all the time. And for a couple of weeks, you might even manage it. But then life kicks in and everything starts to fall apart. There's nothing wrong with being dedicated. Putting time and effort into your health is a good thing. But there's a point when fitness starts to take away from the rest of your life, and that's when it becomes a problem. I once coached someone training for an extreme endurance event called the Sahara 7. It was 7 marathons done across 7 days in the desert. And to prepare for that, training took over a huge part of his life. It meant time away from his family, following a very rigid routine, and everything was structured around that goal. Now that might sound impressive, but it came at a cost. And that's the trade-off most people don't think about. Because if you're honest, you're probably not trying to live like that. You've got work, family, and other responsibilities, so you don't want fitness to take over your life. You probably just want to feel a bit better, have more energy, be a bit stronger, maybe lose some weight. So if the plan you follow doesn't match that and is designed for someone living further along the spectrum, then it will inevitably fail you because it was never designed for your life in the first place. And this is where things get confusing, because when you look online, most of what you see sits at the extreme end. Intense programs, strict routines, big transformations. And it can make you feel if you're not doing that, you're not really doing enough. And that's simply not true. If you train a couple of times a week, go for regular walks, eat reasonably well, that could be enough to move you in the right direction. It just doesn't look impressive on social media. So if you take this idea of the spectrum, it should change how you set your goals, because most people set goals based on where they think they should be, not where it's sustainable for how they live. They aim for perfection, training 6 days a week, a strict diet, no flexibility. Instead of asking the better question, and that is, what can I actually stick to even when work is busy or when I'm tired or if motivation isn't there? Because that's the version that matters. A good goal isn't something you can do when everything's going well. It's something you can keep doing when things aren't. For most people, that might be training 2 sessions a week, a bit more daily movement, and eating some good home-cooked food 80% of the time. Nothing extreme, but something you can repeat. And this is where another idea helps. Instead of trying to be perfect, give yourself a bit of room. An example of this is, rather than aiming for an exact body weight, you give yourself a window. If you're within that range, you're doing fine. If you drop a couple of pounds below it, you can relax a bit. And if you go above it by a couple of pounds, you can tighten things up slightly. But you're not constantly chasing one number, and that can remove a huge amount of pressure. Because you're not trying to get everything right every single day. You're just working to stay within a healthy range over time. And you can apply that to everything. Training, nutrition. It gives you structure without making it feel restrictive. This is something I had to learn myself. There was a time when my training was much more intense. I gave CrossFit a go, and I was always trying to improve, lift more, move faster, and beat previous scores. And in the beginning, it went really well, but over time, things changed. Progress slowed down, my energy would fluctuate, and at some point, I wasn't really improving anymore. I was just trying to maintain. And if your whole mindset is built around constant progress, then it can be difficult to deal with. But what I'd really noticed was that I'd got lost in someone else's training program. I realized I was chasing goals that weren't that important to me. So I changed my approach, and it became less about chasing scores and benchmarks and more about developing the kind of fitness I actually wanted and that level of fitness I needed to support my life. Because the reality is, your position on that spectrum is going to change. There'll be times when you're more focused and more consistent and everything feels on track. And there'll be times when things slip, work gets busy, and other commitments come up, and you move slightly backwards. That's normal. It's not failure, it's just life. I've gone through that myself. There was a point where I was training almost every day, sometimes twice a day. And looking back, I'd probably gone too far towards that extreme. Then my kids were born and everything changed overnight. That level of fitness I wanted wasn't a priority anymore. And when my life settled, I didn't go back to what I was doing before. I adjusted by reducing training and simplifying things. And I found something that works for me. I lift weights a couple of times each week, and I play tennis once or twice a week. And that works great for me. It fits my life. And this is how I approach coaching, because when someone comes to me, they're usually not lacking effort. They're just trying to follow something that doesn't fit their life. So instead of pushing them towards the extreme end of the spectrum, we do the opposite. We start by looking at their life as it is, their work, family, time, their energy levels, and then we build something around that, a training routine they can realistically stick to, not just for a few weeks, but for years. And that's really what my 12-week challenge is built around. It's not about pushing you to the limit or seeing how much you can handle. It's about helping you find your position on this spectrum and building a routine that keeps you there, something simple and repeatable, and something that still works for you when life gets busy. So if you've struggled with fitness in the past, it's worth asking yourself, were you actually lacking discipline? Or were you just trying to live at a point on the fitness spectrum you couldn't sustain? Because you don't need to go to extremes and you don't need a complete overhaul. You just need to move a little further in the right direction and find something that you can stay consistent with.